In the center of the Galactic Academy stood a sealed black chamber known only as the Unbeaten Hall, feared even by the strongest minds across star systems. It was not a place for physical battle. It was where minds were tested against their deepest fears, using simulations crafted by ancient AI designed to mimic the instincts of the deadliest predators ever known. For centuries, beings from advanced civilizations had tried to conquer it, but none lasted more than 15 minutes. Some came out shaking, some screaming, and a few never came out at all. No one had ever passed the predator test. So when a human was selected, just one from a new species barely understood, the council didn't expect much. His name was Carter Vale, a silent engineer with no military record, no awards, just a strange calmness in his eyes. As he stepped toward the chamber, alien officials whispered and laughed, calling him prey in a suit. Carter didn't respond. He looked at the sealed door, adjusted his coat, and entered without a word. The doors hissed shut behind him, and a heavy silence fell. On the main screen, the simulation began. But within seconds, something strange happened. The test's behavior shifted, and the observers leaned forward, uneasy. Inside the chamber, the environment twisted fast. First, a dense jungle under a blood-red sky, then a corridor of a dying spaceship, filled with distant metallic groans and flickering lights. Creatures moved just out of sight, their shapes impossible to describe, built from the collective nightmares of 1,000 species. The simulation searched Carter's mind for fear triggers, but instead of panicking, he paused, watched, and listened. When the jungle closed in, he didn't run. He picked up a stone, felt its weight, and made notes on the patterns of sounds. When the spaceship began to collapse, he calmly found a wall panel and studied its circuits. Outside, the apex observers grew tense. They had seen brave warriors scream in that same jungle and brilliant tacticians crumble in that corridor. But Carter didn't scream. His breathing stayed steady, his eyes moved with focus. The test adjusted, throwing in illusions of drowning, betrayal, and even images of Earth destroyed, but Carter's reaction remained the same, controlled, observant, calculating. The system flagged a warning, subject behavior inconsistent with fear profile. One technician whispered, "Is he not scared?" The senior observer replied, voice low and shaken, "No, he's watching the monsters like a scientist watches a puzzle." The system grew frustrated. It amplified the intensity, merging all known apex predator patterns into one shifting creature: fangs, claws, shadows, voices, all layered into a nightmare meant to break even the most stable mind. But Carter didn't flinch. He sat cross-legged on the ground and began drawing shapes with his finger in the dirt, not for escape, but for understanding. He traced the timing of the attacks, the rhythm of the sounds, the patterns in light flashes. Slowly, he began predicting each threat before it came. The simulation tried to confuse him with rapid changes, but Carter had already cracked the rhythm. It was a code, a loop, not true chaos. He stood up, faced the shifting monster, and instead of reacting, he asked it a question: what happens when prey refuses to run? That single line caused a flicker in the environment. Logs on the control screens outside began showing errors. One system failed to load a fear sequence. Another couldn't generate a response to Carter's calm. The test had never been questioned like this. It had never dealt with someone who didn't fear it but studied it. The engineers outside stared in disbelief as warning lights turned red. The algorithm wasn't adapting, it was breaking. The simulation, desperate to reclaim control, summoned its final creation, a formless predator built from the deepest fears of every species recorded in the galactic archives. It screeched in all languages at once, changed shape with every blink, and surrounded Carter in a storm of sound, light, and illusion. The air burned, the ground cracked, and the walls of the chamber seemed to stretch, but Carter stood still. He looked directly at the beast, eyes unblinking, and spoke with quiet certainty, "You're just code trying to feel like something real." The entity paused, confused. No subject had ever recognized the simulation for what it was. The predator test was meant to blur reality and fear until they became one. But Carter's mind didn't follow that path. He separated fear from threat, illusion from truth. He stepped forward, each footfall making the ground more unstable. not because he was breaking it by force, but because the program couldn't understand him. The test had rules. He ignored them. The test had triggers. He disarmed them. With one final step, Carter reached the core of the simulation, placed his hand on the center console, and whispered something the cameras couldn't pick up. Instantly, the lights exploded, the chamber's walls groaned, and all external systems went offline. Alarms screamed through the control room. For the first time in centuries, the Predator test forcibly shut itself down. The doors of the unbeaten hall opened on their own, smoke spilling into the corridor. Carter walked out slowly, face calm, eyes steady. No scars, no fear, just silence. The Apex Council, watching from the upper chamber, said nothing. The lead observer finally broke the silence with a single line. "We built that test to measure fear. But what do we do with a species that studies it like a tool?" News of what happened in the unbeaten hall spread like wildfire through the Galactic Academy and far beyond into the outer sectors. Species who once mocked humans as weak or primitive now stared at the footage of Carter Vale walking out of the chamber untouched. The Predator test had stood for centuries as the perfect measure of dominance, used to identify the strongest leaders, warriors, and tacticians in the galaxy. It had broken minds with ease, twisted logic into panic, and reduced proud beings to trembling shells. But now, it had met a man who didn't fight it, didn't fear it, he understood it. The Apex Council held a private meeting the same day. They watched recordings of Carter's calm behavior, his refusal to run, his strange drawings on the floor, and the final moment where he spoke to the simulation's core before the system crashed. "Rewriting protocol," one engineer said. "Or maybe rejecting it completely," added another. Carter was called to speak before the council, but he didn't give a long speech. He simply said, "Fear is not weakness. It's information. And humans listen to it, but we don't let it drive the ship." That single sentence was quoted across thousands of worlds. The council was forced to update Earth's classification, moving humanity from low threat, culturally curious to cognitive apex class, potentially strategic priority. New protocols were created for how to engage with humans in tests and negotiations. But behind closed doors, the truth was far more unsettling. The simulation's final logs showed Carter had left behind a small line of altered code, simple, elegant, and completely outside the machine's original design. It didn't corrupt the system. It evolved it. For the first time, the Predator test began questioning its own purpose. Some whispered that Carter had not just passed the test, he had changed what fear meant. No longer a weapon, no longer a wall, but something else entirely. And across the stars, species began to wonder if this is what one quiet human could do with nothing but his mind. What would happen if Earth sent more,